Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lin. Namaskar, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Kremlin calls Ukraine peace talks constructive, but no territorial compromise reached after 5-hour meeting in Moscow. US lawmakers tell Trump not to attack Venezuela, warn they may use Congress to restrict military powers as tensions rise in the Caribbean. Deadly floods in Indonesia leave 753 people dead and 650 missing. Over 3.2 million people on Sumatra Island affected. And in cricket, India cruised towards a mammoth total as Virat Kohli breaks his own record, smashes his 53rd ODI ton. Kremlin has described the Ukraine peace talks as constructive, but they've said no compromise had been reached on territorial questions. The comments come after the talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin, the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner held for nearly 5 hours in Moscow.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and US negotiators, including Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, failed to produce a breakthrough on securing Ukraine peace deal. Kremlin spokesperson said though the meeting was constructive, but parts of the plan remained unacceptable to Russia.
The conversation was very useful, constructive and very meaningful. It lasted not for 5 minutes but for 5 hours. Naturally, we discussed with US colleagues the content of those drafts, those documents which the Americans submitted to Moscow some time ago. We went through these documents. We did not discuss any specific formulas, any specific American proposals. We could agree with certain things and the President confirmed this to his interlocutors. We criticized some things and the President did not hide a critical, even negative attitude to a number of proposals.
Just before the meeting, Putin said changes proposed by Kyiv and Europe to a US-backed draft peace plan were unacceptable. He said Russia did not want a war with European powers but was ready to fight if Europe did want a direct conflict with Moscow.
We are not planning to fight Europe. I've said this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly decides to wage war against us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I believe that very quickly. This is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical, careful way. You understand, right? It is not war in the full modern sense of the word. If Europe chooses to start a war, the situation can very quickly reach a point where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
While Tuesday's talks were underway, Trump told his cabinet in Washington that the conflict had not been easy to resolve, describing it as a mess.
As you know, we have a problem with a war that our people are trying to settle now with Russia and Ukraine, but we're trying to get that settled. I've settled 8 wars. This would be the 9th, and our people are over in Russia right now to see if we can get it settled. Not an easy situation, let me tell you. What a mess. It's a war that never would have happened if I were president. Not even a chance. And it didn't happen for 4 years.
Ukrainian president thanked Ireland for its support during a visit to Dublin on Tuesday, telling lawmakers that unity among Ukraine's partners had become a main weapon in conflict. Ukrainian representatives have held 2 rounds of high-level talks on the draft plan in recent weeks, which have been attended by Witkoff, Kushner, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Bureau Report, DD India.
Foreign ministers from the 32-nation alliance gathered in Brussels to discuss Washington's push to end the fighting. But US top diplomat Marco Rubio was skipping the meeting. Now, the gathering comes after US envoys appeared to fail to make a major breakthrough on efforts to stop the conflict in 5 hours of talks with Putin in Moscow. As part of those moves, Germany, Poland, Norway, the Netherlands and Canada said that they would together commit some $1 billion more to a scheme to buy American weapons for Ukraine. And for more on this, we are joined by Lars Holter. Working with Deutsche Welle. He joins us from Berlin. Lars, what are we learning from Rubio's absence? What does it tell us about the United States and its role in NATO going forward?
Yeah, well, that is a big question here as it is right now in motion. It has never happened before, really, in NATO history that the United States, of course, for decades, the driving force at NATO financially, but also, of course, in terms of strategy, that they would not send their top diplomat to such a meeting. And it is just unfortunate how in the lead up to this meeting, we could pretty much really read the disdain that the United States is showing towards NATO right now, with Marco Rubio here simply stating that he cannot possibly be expected to attend every meeting, because obviously, yes, technically he can, and US Secretaries of State have always attended every meeting. So what we're seeing here is really the United States removing itself a little bit more even from NATO, and what we're seeing from NATO in response is obviously everything they can do in their power to rope the United States back in, including what you just mentioned, with NATO agreeing to buy more US-made weapons.
Lars, also, what will this all mean for Ukraine now, and for the prospect of ending the war?
Yes, that of course is the biggest question here, and things are moving, especially overnight, since obviously we had a meeting between the United States representatives and Vladimir Putin in Moscow, and we're only getting a low trickle of information out of that meeting. Not much is known about what exactly happened, except that Russia seems to be currently more leaning towards aggressive terms and not agreeing with Europe demanding changes to the latest agreement. What we've seen, of course, especially when it comes to the United States involvement in all this, Trump has seemed to align himself much more with Russia than with Ukraine as of late, promoting at that peace plan, or that so-called peace plan recently, that looked to many observers like a document straight from the Kremlin. NATO members countries, of course, now in this meeting in Brussels, still ongoing, seem to be trying to fix a few things and strengthen Ukraine's position to counter this initial plan, which was, of course, unacceptable to Kiev, but also to Western partners, as this original document seemed to reward and thus encourage even one country's aggression. But while NATO partners are now discussing more military help and the possible conditions of an end to the war and even territorial question, Ukraine likely knows, as do the other NATO members, of course, that any commitment by the US is just weak and unreliable, and that just gets underscored by the very fact that we have this absence of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who would likely now, even whatever is coming out of Brussels, find it easier to renegotiate anything, if only by stating that he had never signed on in the first place.
Indeed. Final question, Lars. Also, does this make it look like they are just kicking the can down the road a little bit further, and making this war appear to be, for the outsider, a never-ending war?
It seems like it, but it wouldn't make sense for them to kick the can down the road. I think everybody at that table would really like to see a solution, but we also can clearly see out of latest comments that we've heard from Moscow now that there is no easy way to do this or to negotiate anything right now. Moscow just keeps pushing for more territory. They keep pushing the international community to grant them the Donbas region, or large parts thereof. So this is not merely just kicking the can down the road, but I think there's just a lack of ideas of how they can compromise.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Lars Holter, for joining us from Berlin. The European Union negotiators say that they have reached a deal to phase out Russian gas imports by 2027, aiming to end the bloc's reliance on Moscow for energy. The European Council announced on Wednesday that it has reached an agreement with the European Parliament to cut Russian gas imports in stages over the next 3 years. The plan includes a binding ban on liquefied natural gas imports from the end of 2026, followed by a complete halt to pipeline gas purchases by autumn of 2027. The move comes after a sharp decline in Russian gas deliveries since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, dropping to 12% of EU imports compared with 45% before the conflict. Hungary, France and Belgium remain among the member states that are still receiving Russian gas. Dissent is growing in Washington as the U.S. lawmakers clash over President Trump's escalating military activity in the Caribbean, as well as pressure on Venezuela. Senators and representatives from both parties are now threatening to invoke Congress's war powers if the administration moves forward with a strike inside the country. Here's a report by DD India's Harshita Oberoi.
For months, US lawmakers have voiced concerns over what they call an unchecked campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. On Tuesday, Senators Tim Kaine, Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, and Rand Paul warned that unauthorized military action would be a dangerous and unacceptable step. A similar resolution in the House aims to block hostilities without congressional consent. Concerns have intensified following at least 20 US strikes on suspected drug smuggling boats since September, which have killed more than 80 people, and reports that a second strike targeting survivors may violate international law. Meanwhile, US Navy vessels and military jets were seen on Tuesday near Ponce, Puerto Rico. The show of force comes as the US maintains pressure on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, whose chances of a safe US-mediated exit appear increasingly slim. After a recent call in which Trump dismissed most of Maduro's demands, the president declared Venezuela's airspace closed in its entirety, with Puerto Rico serving as a forward base for operations tied to the crisis. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth noted that strikes have been temporarily paused because drug smuggling vessels have become harder to locate, but emphasized that operations against traffickers will resume.
And I will just end by saying, as President Trump always has our back, we always have the back of our commanders who are making decisions in difficult situations, and we do in this case and all these strikes. They're making judgment calls and ensuring that they defend the American people. They've done the right things. We'll keep doing that.
US President Donald Trump warned that any country trafficking illegal drugs into the US citing cocaine from Colombia is subject to attack, underlining his hard-line approach to narcotics.
Anybody that's doing that and selling it into our country is subject to attack.
Amid this escalating tension, Pope Leo, the first US-born pope, cautioned against military intervention, advocating dialogue and economic pressure instead. Harshita Oberoi for DD India.
In a bold escalation of its anti-immigration agenda, the Trump administration on Tuesday suspended all green card and citizenship applications from nationals of 19 high-risk countries under existing travel bans, including Afghanistan, Yemen, Haiti, Venezuela, Sudan, Somalia, Iran, Libya, Burma, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, and Eritrea. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services memo, citing national security, blames lax Biden-era vetting for last week's fatal D.C. shooting of 2 National Guard soldiers by an Afghan evacuee who pled not guilty to murder on Tuesday. Immigration lawyers report cancelled naturalization oaths and interviews, sparking family separations and backlogs. The Department of Homeland Security eyes broader refugee reviews. Critics decry punishment, that's collective punishment. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has vowed permanent pauses on poorer nations' migration, fueling deportation drives amid housing and crime rhetoric. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office announced on Wednesday that forensic tests have confirmed that the remains handed over by Hamas on Tuesday do not belong to either of the last two deceased hostages still held in Gaza. Under the October ceasefire agreement, Hamas transferred what the Red Cross described as the body of one of the remaining victims. Israel's National Center for Forensic Medicine examined the materials termed findings by the Israeli Defense Forces and determined that they are unrelated to any hostage. Meanwhile, Israel will send a representative to meet officials in Lebanon in a bid to establish a basis for relationship and economic cooperation. Israel and Lebanon entered a US-brokered ceasefire agreement last year, but Israel has not halted strikes against Lebanon's militant Hezbollah group ever since. Still to come here on DD India Live. The Indian government drops mandatory pre-installation of Sanchar Sathi app. Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav reviews the Delhi NCR pollution control and orders action reports as well as faster emission monitoring. Indian women's hockey team faces Germany in the FIH Junior World Cup. They eye winning streak in Santiago.
This week on Defense Dynamic, we break down the evolution from S-400 to S-500 and what this leap in air defense technology means for India. High-altitude pseudo-satellites, a first-of-its-kind manufacturing facility, perhaps is now operational. Why is India rethinking its aerospace propulsion roadmap? We explain the shift. This Wednesday at 8 PM IST only on DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. Preparations are on for Russian President Vladimir Putin's two-day visit to India, which begins Thursday. The Kremlin spokesperson said that trade would figure high on the agenda of the 23rd India-Russia annual summit. Akhilesh Suman reports from New Delhi.
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Tuesday said that during his upcoming visit to India, Russian President Vladimir Putin will discuss both bilateral and international issues with Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
India for us is a great partner, and we do hope that the visit of President Putin will be successful. As successful was the visit of Prime Minister Modi 1 year ago to Moscow. President and Prime Minister had a very, very good possibility to spend lots of hours together discussing the most sensitive issues of the global and regional agenda. We hope that this will be the case for New Delhi meeting the day after tomorrow.
Addressing a virtual press conference organized by Sputnik News, Peskov said there's vast potential for cooperation between India and Russia, ranging from small nuclear reactors and military equipment to various goods and services. Peskov reiterated that sanctions imposed on Russia by the US and the EU are illegal, as they have not been authorized by the United Nations. Peskov also said that Putin will also share a first-hand assessment of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and the efforts to resolve it.
We do appreciate the position and the stand of India vis-à-vis Ukrainian settlement and Ukrainian affair. We do appreciate the readiness of New Delhi to contribute to a search of peaceful solution in this very complicated conflict. And we do respect the position of Prime Minister Modi, and we do respect the possibility of exchanging information from the first hands between himself and our president, and we hope that this practice will continue.
Business leaders from both the countries will meet in Delhi to explore deeper business-to-business partnerships which could help narrow the trade imbalance which currently favors Russia. Akhilesh Suman's report, DD India.
The centre has scrapped its plan to mandate pre-installation of the Sanchar Sathi citizen cybersecurity app on all new smartphones, citing overwhelming public acceptance. Now launched to empower users to report fraud and block malicious numbers, this app, it saw a record 6 lakh registrations in a single day, a 10-fold jump, pushing total downloads past 1.4 crores. Now, officials have clarified that the app is fully voluntary, removable anytime, and contains no other features. The Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav has reviewed the Delhi NCR pollution control efforts, and he's directed states to submit action reports and accelerate emission monitoring systems. Tapas Bhattacharya has this report.
In a high-level review meeting on Delhi NCR's air pollution, Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav directed all state and duty authorities to submit concrete action-taken reports on their pollution management efforts. This was the 6th such meeting to assess ongoing measures for preventing and controlling air pollution across the region. The minister also outlined a year-long action plan for 2026 aimed at ensuring sustained monitoring and intervention throughout the year and not just during peak pollution months.
पराली का ये जो विषय है, इस विषय को लेने के लिए हम लोगों ने ये तय किया है कि एक मीटिंग हम चंडीगढ़ में आयोजित करेंगे, जहां पर हरियाणा और पंजाब की सरकारों को बुला करके हम पराली के विषय के प्रबंधन की भी 1 वर्षीय योजना काम करेंगे। हमारा ये मानना है कि पिछले ली गई 6 मीटिंगों के परिणाम आपको CAQM चेयरमैन और बाकी लोगों ने बताया है, और अब आने वाले 1 वर्ष की योजना पर हम नीचे जाकर के काम करेंगे।
The minister stressed that the installation of online continuous emission monitoring systems and air pollution control devices is being expedited across Delhi NCR. He called for urgent steps to close gaps in construction and demolition waste processing while encouraging agencies to focus on a targeted road development action plan for Delhi to reduce dust pollution.
जो महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे हैं वाहनों को लेकर, रोड डस्ट के अबेटमेंट को लेकर, और उसके अलावा ग्रीनिंग एंड प्लांटेशन, म्युनिसिपल सॉलिड वेस्ट का मैनेजमेंट और आगे की योजना क्या होनी चाहिए, इन सब विषयों पे विस्तृत चर्चा हुई। अगर हम जनवरी से नवंबर का पीरियड लें तो केवल 3 दिन जो है वो AQI 400 से ऊपर क्रॉस किया है पूरे साल में।
Highlighting improvements on the environmental front, Bhupendra Yadav said accelerated greening efforts across NCR, from roadside plantations to urban forest development, remain a priority to improve local air quality. He also pointed to India's strong performance at the recently held UN COP30 climate summit, calling it a milestone for climate equity and justice. India's concern on climate finance, technology transfer, adaptation, and unilateral trade measures were fully articulated and successfully incorporated into the final decisions.
COP30 में नेगोशिएशन में जो भारत के विषय हैं और जो दुनिया में विकासशील देशों के विषय हैं, उनको बहुत अच्छे तरीके से एड्रेस किया गया है। पहली बार क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस को लेकर के LMDC देशों की मांग पर एक 2 साल का वर्क प्रोग्राम शुरू करने की जिम्मेदारी तय हुई। यूनिलैटरल ट्रेड मेजर्स का और खासकर CBAM जैसे विषय को लेकर के हमारी चिंता रहती थी। अब इस विषय को पहली बार UNFCCC के ऑफिशियल एजेंडे में शामिल किया गया।
Reiterating the government's commitment to cleaner air and a sustainable future, the minister urged coordinated action from authorities, institutions and citizens to ensure long-term, measurable improvement. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
And now some updates on the Indonesian floods and the death toll there from the floods and landslides across 3 provinces in Indonesia on the Sumatra island has risen to 753. 650 people are still listed as missing, and the heavy rain started on November 23. It caused rivers to swell in many parts of Sumatra and landslides to occur in several areas. Over 3.2 million people have been affected. The UN's World Meteorological Organization has warned that such extreme rainfall events will intensify with climate change as warmer air holds more moisture. After an all-round dominant batting performance, India have set a massive target of 359 for South Africa in the second ODI match at Raipur. The headlines belong to Ruturaj Gaikwad and Virat Kohli after losing Rohit Sharma and Yashasvi Jaiswal early. Kohli and Gaikwad, they stitched together a massive partnership of 195. Gaikwad departed for a brilliant 105, registering his maiden ODI century. At the other end, the run machine, Virat Kohli, has continued his golden form. He brought up his 53rd ODI century, his second in a row after the ton in Ranchi, before getting caught by Markram. The Indian women's hockey team will aim to continue their winning streak as they face Germany in the FIH Junior Women's World Cup in Santiago City of Chile today. So India began their campaign with a comprehensive 13-0 win against Namibia, while Germany thrashed Ireland 7-1. And for the first time in the tournament's history, 24 teams contest for the title. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lin from all of us here in Delhi. Thank you for watching DD India News Hour. I beg your pardon, DD India Live. Namaskar.